We're redoing the stone veneer on the front of our house, and we found ourselves needing some additional walkboards for the scaffolding, but instead of buying some more, we decided to make them ourselves. In this video, I'll show you how we did it. This is what we based the design off of. These are 24-inch wide by 92-inch long wooden walkboards that someone had made for this set of scaffolding. These are designed to fit mason's scaffold sections that are 5 feet by 5 feet and have an assembled width of 7 feet. We changed the width from 24-inch wide boards down to 14-inch wide boards. And we wanted to make sure these were as light as possible so they're easier to work with. Also, by having 4 different boards, it allowed us some additional flexibility when it comes to having work surfaces as we go up. If you'd like to have a list of all the materials we used for this, I'm going to have all that information in the video description below. First thing we did was cut the 2x4s down to the 92-inch length using a miter saw. These cutouts allow the platforms to sit down on the rails so they don't shift around as you're walking on the boards. Now in our case, the distance between those pipes came out to 84 inches on center. To make these cutouts, we ended up using a 2 3/8 inch hole saw, and we had to use that with a jig that we made because if you don't, there's not enough material for a pilot bit to hold onto since it's only a half circle cutout. The easiest way to cut these holes is with the pilot bit removed from the arbor. If you can't do that, the other option you might have is to unscrew the hole saw from the arbor itself if you have a quick connect arbor. Otherwise, you might have to screw a screw into the end of the board in order to wiggle that excess material out of place and remove it from the inside of the hole saw. Once we had the first board cut, we ended up using that as a template to mark all the other boards, so that way we kept things consistent. For the ends and the bracing, we ended up ripping down a 2x6 in half. Now, we could have gone with the full 2x4 here, but we wanted to reduce the weight as much as possible, so we went with the 2x6 in order to cut down some additional weight. Since we're making 14-inch wide boards, we ended up cutting the ripped 2x6 down to 11-inch sections, and we just needed one ripped 2x6 for all 4 platforms. To assemble the frames, we laid out the boards on a flat surface and then screwed one of the ripped 2x6 sections to each end of the frame first in order to form a box. We used 2.5-inch deck screws for all the screws on this project. Once we had all the frames made, we ended up placing them all on the scaffold just to make sure everything fit properly before we went through the process of cutting and attaching the decking. For the decking, we ripped a sheet of 7/16-inch OSB to 14-inch widths and then laid them out on the frames for assembly. We marked the length of the decking in place and made the final cut using the circular saw. Since we're using OSB, we decided to install the decking with the rough side up, which should allow us to have some additional traction as we're walking around. To attach the OSB to the frames, we used the same 2.5-inch deck screws and pre-drilled the holes again. We used a screw for each corner and one in the center of each of the end boards. We also used a deck screw about every 15 inches around the perimeter. I installed 2 braces spaced roughly 30 inches apart and put one deck screw in each end in order to hold them in place. Once those were screwed into the sides, I flipped the platforms over and sunk one deck screw into the center of each of the braces as well. In order to have something substantial to hold onto and to have a place to put a rope if we needed it, I used the same hole saw to cut another hole in the end of the OSB at about 4 inches from the edge. Once you're done making all your cuts, be sure to come back and sand down all the rough edges because you really don't want to get a splinter when you're having to work with these boards up on scaffolding. Last but not least, be sure to coat your boards in a good sealant or stain. That way these are going to last longer, especially if you end up leaving the boards out in the weather. In our case, we had some leftover deck stain that we ended up using to give these a final finish. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.